I recorded a private session with Lady Gaga, and what crawled out of her shadow wasn't her. What was supposed to be a rare behind-the-scenes moment turned into a nightmare I'll never forget. As the cameras rolled, a dark force began to take control, twisting the woman I knew into something unrecognizable. The shadows grew, and I realized I was no longer alone in that room. You'll want to hear this, because once you know the truth, you'll never look at her the same way again. I walked into that studio thinking it was just another typical gig. Set up the camera, roll the tape, capture a few candid moments with Lady Gaga. What could be more exciting than that? A private session with one of the biggest stars in the world, but the moment I stepped in, something felt different. It wasn't just excitement or nerves. It was something darker. Lady Gaga entered, looking every bit the star, powerful, confident, magnetic. She greeted the crew with her usual warmth, but there was a subtle shift. She didn't quite meet my eyes when she spoke, and there was a quietness to her that didn't seem right. It was like something was holding her back. As the crew set up, I kept my eyes on her. The air in the room seemed to thicken, the shadows stretching unnaturally, creeping along the edges like they had a mind of their own. I told myself it was just the lighting, but it felt wrong. Gaga was still preparing for the session, focused on her work, but something in her movement seemed off. There was a stillness in her, as though she were suppressing something she couldn't shake. I tried to ignore it, but the weight of the atmosphere pressed down on me. The room felt like it was closing in. When we finally began the session, her voice was calm, but her eyes, they weren't the same. For a brief moment, I saw darkness in them, a void that wasn't there before. It was fleeting, gone in the blink of an eye, but I couldn't shake the image. I brushed it off, but as she laughed and made a comment, the unease never left. Then, the shadow seemed to stretch toward her, twisting and writhing as if alive. I looked around the room, trying to rationalize it, but nothing had changed. The crew was still busy with their work, but the air was so thick, it felt suffocating. When I looked back at her, her eyes were darker, almost hollow, staring straight through me. "Are you okay?" I asked, my voice shaky, the discomfort creeping in again. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Of course," she said, but her tone felt wrong, empty. Something was in the room with us, something that wasn't just lighting or nerves. I wanted to ask more, but something in me held back. It was like if I spoke out, it would only make things worse. And what I didn't know was that this was just the beginning. The real nightmare was about to unfold. But this wasn't just a recording session. The real nightmare was about to begin. What I would witness next would change everything I thought I knew about her, and the shadows that haunted her. At first, I convinced myself it was just nerves. After all, I was sitting across from Lady Gaga, whose presence could alter any room. But as the session continued, the unease grew. It wasn't just an artist preparing for a performance. This felt different. Something darker, more sinister. Her voice started steady, but then it began to shift. She would pause mid-sentence, as if searching for the right words, her speech slowing down as though she were struggling to control her own body. I noticed the slight tremble in her hands when she wasn't speaking, as if holding it together was becoming too much. It was when she moved to adjust in her chair that I saw it. Her body, once graceful, now seemed stiff and unnatural. She had been the epitome of fluidity just moments before, but now it was like her movements were being forced. Her limbs twitched erratically, like she was fighting against an invisible force. My heart raced, my throat tightening. Something was happening, something that had nothing to do with nerves. It felt dangerous. Then it happened again. That sensation, being watched. But this time, it was closer. The shadows in the corners of the room seemed to expand, slowly creeping along the walls. It was subtle, but I could feel it. The darkness wasn't just in the room. It seemed to be pulling at her, growing out of her, wrapping around her. I tried to focus on her words. She was talking about an upcoming performance, but the more she spoke, the more I noticed her voice wavering. At times, it almost sounded like a second voice was trying to break through, fighting for control. She would say something that didn't quite make sense, then correct herself, as if she knew something was wrong but couldn't stop it. "Are you okay?" I asked, my voice quiet, unsure of what was happening but needing to break the tension. Her eyes flicked to me, clear, focused, but then, just as quickly, the darkness returned. Her smile grew, but it wasn't the warm, inviting smile I knew. This was something else, something cold. "I'm fine," she replied, but her voice sounded wrong. Smooth, almost robotic, as if each word was being forced out by something else. My instinct screamed at me to leave, but I couldn't move. I couldn't look away. There was something hypnotic about the way the darkness surrounded her, the way her eyes, those eyes, seemed to pull me in. I tried to steer the conversation, asking about her upcoming tour, hoping it would distract from the growing tension in the room. But with every word I spoke, it felt like the shadows pressed closer, tightening around me, suffocating the air. And then, it happened again. For a brief second, Gaga's expression faltered. Her face twisted in pain, a flash of something almost human behind the cold exterior. But it was gone as quickly as it came. She took a deep breath, her posture rigid as if bracing herself. And that was when I saw it. Her left hand shot out toward the camera, trembling, not pulling back. She just stared at it, fingers tight, unnatural, like the bones were creaking beneath her skin. I glimpsed the reflection in the lens. It wasn't her reflection. It was dark, empty, and in that split second, I saw something move. Something that wasn't her. It wasn't just her shadow anymore. It was an extension of her, contorted, twisting, crawling behind her like it was alive. I blinked, unsure if I was seeing things. When I looked back at the lens, everything appeared normal. Gaga was still sitting there, her fingers gripping the chair, her smile faint but unsettlingly empty. But I couldn't ignore the cold feeling gnawing at me. It wasn't her. Whatever was inside her, it was growing stronger. Her voice shifted again. It wasn't just altered. It was something else, something different. There was a strange resonance to it, like two voices were entwined. One was hers, but the other, it was darker, deeper, unnatural. "I've always been alone in the dark," she whispered, her words spilling out as if she couldn't stop them. "The shadows are always with me, watching, waiting. I can't escape them." My stomach twisted. This wasn't the Lady Gaga I knew. This was something else, something terrifying. The presence was taking over. And I didn't know what to do. I couldn't stop it. The shadows weren't just around her anymore. They were inside her, possessing her. And I was witnessing it all. But the worst wasn't over. What I didn't know was that the shadows weren't finished with her. or with me. What happened next was beyond anything I could have imagined. The room felt colder now. The unsettling energy that had been creeping in slowly began to consume everything. The temperature dropped so fast that I could see my breath in the air, and yet the lights remained as bright as before. I could feel it, like a weight pressing down on me, suffocating every breath. The shadows in the corners of the room were no longer just moving. They were shifting, changing shape, like they had a mind of their own. They reached out, long, dark fingers creeping along the edges of the walls. I wanted to say something, to ask if she was okay, but my voice felt trapped inside me. The moment I tried to speak, the air seemed to thicken, as if the room itself was warning me to stay silent. I looked at Gaga again, but something had changed. It wasn't just her voice anymore. It was her presence. Her eyes, still black and empty, were now fully fixed on me. She wasn't blinking. She wasn't breathing. And then, with an unnatural jerk, she turned toward me. Her movement was stiff, like a puppet's strings had been pulled too tight. She didn't speak, just stared at me with those dark, soulless eyes. It felt like time had stopped. I couldn't look away. I felt like I was falling into a void, the darkness pulling me in, deeper and deeper. The air seemed to warp, bending around her as though it were a living thing, drawn to her, feeding off her. Suddenly her lips parted. Not in the way she spoke before. This was different. The sound that came out was like a growl, deep and guttural. It sent a jolt through my body, making every hair on my neck stand on end. It was the sound of something not quite human, something ancient, crawling out from the depths of her. "It's not her anymore," the voice hissed. "She's gone. I'm what's left." The room spun, and I stumbled back, my heart hammering in my chest. Was this a joke? Some twisted performance? Was she playing me? Toying with me? But then I saw it. The shadow. It wasn't just an outline anymore. It was shaping, forming, solidifying. It was like a dark fog wrapping around her, crawling out from her very skin, as though it were a part of her that had been trapped inside all along. The shadow shifted, contorting until it finally broke free. It moved with speed like a blur, and I saw it. It was alive. It was no longer just an outline. It was a thing, a creature, its form twisted like it was made of liquid darkness, shifting and reshaping with every breath it took. It had no face, no real shape, just endless blackness that seemed to pull everything into it. I gasped and tried to step back, but I couldn't tear my eyes away. It was impossible. The room felt like it was closing in, the walls bending toward the figure. The creature, no, the shadow, moved toward Gaga, and she didn't resist. She couldn't. It wrapped around her, suffocating her in darkness. And then, for the first time, I saw it. Her body shuddered, as if trying to break free, but the shadow just swallowed her whole. Her movements became erratic, desperate. She gripped the chair she was sitting in, but it was no use. The shadow had fully consumed her. Her body jerked again, and for a moment, it felt like she was fighting to stay herself, but it was too late. The shadow had taken over. Gaga's lips parted again, but this time, it wasn't her speaking. The voice that came out wasn't hers. It was deeper, raspier, almost alien. It was as if the very air in the room had become tainted, and the words themselves were dangerous. "I have been waiting," it said, the voice filling every corner of the room. waiting for the right moment, waiting for her to fall. I felt the blood drain from my face. It was like the room had folded in on itself. The walls felt like they were closing in, and every inch of air was tainted with the presence of that dark thing. I wanted to run. I needed to run, but my legs wouldn't move. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think. Everything in me screamed that this wasn't just a dream, that this was real. Gaga was gone. She was no longer the woman I thought I knew. This thing, this shadow had taken over. And the worst part, it was now speaking through her. "You think she was strong," the voice hissed again, its tone mocking. "But she was weak. She was always weak. I've always been here, always in the shadows, always waiting for my time." I felt a cold sweat break out across my forehead. What was I supposed to do? This wasn't just a haunting or a possession. This was something far worse. The shadow had taken root inside her, and it was using her as a vessel, a puppet. And I was trapped, locked in a room with a creature that wanted more than just her soul. The shadow seemed to grow more powerful with every passing second. It seemed to feed on her energy, her essence. I could see the life draining out of her as it consumed her, taking her down with it. She was slipping away, and there was nothing I could do. I wanted to scream. I wanted to run. But the shadow didn't just control her, it was controlling me, too. My mind began to cloud. I couldn't think straight. The darkness was pulling at me, tempting me to submit to it, to give in to the terrifying void that was stretching out before me. It wasn't just Gaga that was dying. It was me, too. The room was collapsing into the abyss. And then, as quickly as it started, the shadow stopped. Gaga's body fell limp and the room was still. The silence was deafening, but I knew it wasn't over. The shadow had only just begun. But the worst part? I was only beginning to realize that the shadow didn't just want Gaga. It wanted everything, and it wasn't finished with me yet. I don't know how long I stood there. Time seemed to lose its meaning as the room pulsed with an unnatural energy. The oppressive silence made my skin crawl, and the air felt thick, like it was suffocating me. Lady Gaga's body hung limply in her chair, but the darkness around her didn't fade. It lingered, looming over her, still present, still waiting. For what? I wasn't sure. But it wasn't just waiting. It was watching. And then, as if something snapped in the air, the voice came again. But this time, it wasn't just a distorted version of Gaga's. It was something entirely different. The voice that echoed through the room was deep, resonating with an ancient fury that seemed to come from the very core of the earth. "You think you've seen it all?" The voice hissed, as if mocking my fear. "You haven't seen anything yet." I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. The shadows that had been swirling around her grew heavier, as if they were turning into solid matter. The air grew colder, like the room had been transported to some other dimension, a dimension where darkness was the only rule. The very walls seemed to be closing in, but I couldn't move. I couldn't think. I could only watch. The thing that had taken over her body, this spirit, this vengeful force, was speaking through her. And with each word, it felt like the ground beneath me was crumbling. "You think you know who she is," it continued, its voice smooth, dripping with malice. "You think she is the one you admire. but she is just a shell, a vessel, and I am the true power, the one that has been waiting. The room spun. The shadows seemed to grow darker, more solid, and I could feel myself being pulled in. The feeling wasn't just physical, it was mental. The pull of the darkness was reaching into my mind, twisting my thoughts, blurring everything around me. I was drowning in it. And then the spirit revealed its true nature. I am the one who has been wronged, it growled, the voice dripping with resentment. I was betrayed long ago, left to rot, forgotten, and now I claim what is rightfully mine. The price for her fame, for her glory, is her soul, and it will be mine. I could barely comprehend the words. Who was it talking about? Who was the spirit referring to? Who had betrayed it? The details were hazy, distant, but the anger was clear. It was something that had been festering for years, something ancient, buried deep within the spirit, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. As it spoke, the shadows that had been surrounding her seemed to shift and swirl, reaching out, pulling at her body. I watched in absolute horror as Lady Gaga's face twisted in a grotesque expression of pain, as if she were being torn apart from the inside out. Her eyes, once completely black, flickered momentarily, almost as if the real her was still trying to break free. But it was hopeless. The spirit was in full control now. "You can't save her," the voice hissed, mocking me. "You don't even know who she is anymore. She's just a puppet, and I am the one pulling the strings." The intensity of the spirit's presence grew with each word it spoke. It wasn't just inside Gaga anymore. It was manifesting in the room. The darkness was all around us now, thickening with every passing second, and I could feel it pressing in on me, clawing at my very being. It was like I was surrounded by an endless void, a nightmare that had no end. I stepped back, but my feet felt like they were glued to the floor. I couldn't run. I couldn't scream. Every ounce of my will was paralyzed by the overwhelming force that was overtaking the room. The shadows were no longer just surrounding her. They were inside me, pulling at the edges of my mind, wrapping themselves around my thoughts, suffocating my very consciousness. And then, with terrifying clarity, the spirit spoke again. "I will take everything. I will consume her. And then, I will take everything you hold dear. Everything." The last word echoed in the room, reverberating in my ears long after it had stopped. My body trembled, but I couldn't move. The room was spinning, the darkness growing until I thought I was going to be swallowed whole. Lady Gaga's body jerked once again, and for a brief moment I saw something, someone familiar. Her expression twisted into something that could only be described as pure terror, her lips trembling, trying to speak, trying to call out. But it was too late. The spirit had taken over completely. It had consumed her. And in that moment, it felt like the very essence of who she was, the real her, had been wiped away, replaced by something ancient and vengeful. The room was now entirely cloaked in darkness, suffocating, absolute. There was no escaping it. It was too late. But just as the shadow seemed to reach its peak, something unexpected happened. The spirit's voice faltered. There was a brief hesitation, like it had been momentarily thrown off guard. That's when I realized it wasn't just the spirit that was at war inside her. It was also her. Her soul was still there, trapped, struggling to regain control, to break free from the spirit's hold. And for a split second, I felt like there was a chance that she might be able to fight back, that she might be able to regain what she had lost. But the shadow wasn't done. It was just beginning its work. The darkness was too strong, but the spirit wasn't done yet. It had only begun its quest for vengeance, and what happened next would change everything. It wasn't just about taking Gaga's soul anymore. It was about claiming something even more precious, something closer to me than I could ever imagine. The room was pitch black now. I could feel the coldness seeping through my skin, digging into my bones. The shadows that had once seemed like just a presence in the corners of the room were now a living force, an entity all on its own, twisting, shifting, and pulling at the very fabric of reality around me. I was trapped. There was no escape from this suffocating darkness. Lady Gaga's body remained in the same rigid position, her face still twisted in terror, her lips trembling, but the spirit, the vengeful presence that had overtaken her, was clearly in control. I could hear her gasping for breath, struggling within the confines of her own body, but it was like her struggles were futile. Her soul lost to something far more powerful than I could even begin to comprehend. The spirit's voice rang out again, a low, guttural whisper that seemed to fill the room with malice. "You think you can save her?" The voice mocked, dripping with scorn. "She is mine, forever." I felt the words slither down my spine, like icy fingers digging into my flesh. But something inside me refused to accept it. I couldn't accept it. There had to be something I could do. I couldn't just stand here and watch her slip away. I couldn't just stand by while this thing tore her apart. My gaze darted to Lady Gaga's still form, and for a brief moment, I saw it. The tiniest glimmer of hope. Her lips parted, and I could hear the faintest sound, a whisper so soft that it barely cut through the thick silence of the room. "Help me." It was just a breath, a barely audible plea, but it was enough. It was enough to make me believe that she was still in there, trapped, but fighting. But the moment that hope flickered in my chest, the shadows in the room seemed to pulse. The darkness churned, swirling violently, and I felt a pressure building, like a wave of energy crashing toward me. The spirit inside her wasn't done. It was only growing stronger. "You think you can help her?" The spirit's voice echoed with unbelievable fury. "You're just as weak as she is. Nothing can stop me." The shadows surged again, tightening their grip on the room. Lady Gaga's body jerked in an unnatural spasm. Her limbs twisted in ways that no human body should ever move, her back arching, her head tilting at a grotesque angle. The spirit was fighting for dominance, and it was winning. I wanted to scream, to do something, anything to break free from the terror that had engulfed me, but I stood frozen, my feet glued to the floor, unable to move, unable to help. Then, just as quickly as it had started, the violent thrashing stopped. The room became eerily still again. The air was so thick I could feel it pressing against my skin. A deep, heavy silence filled the space, and for a fleeting second, I thought maybe, just maybe, the battle for her soul was over. But the silence wasn't comforting. It was unnerving. And then I saw it. Lady Gaga's eyes flickered open, but this time, it wasn't just the familiar black void that stared back at me. Her eyes, those familiar eyes, had returned. It was her. The real her. She gasped for breath, her chest heaving as if she had been submerged underwater. Her hands clenched the arms of the chair, her knuckles turning white as she fought to stay grounded. It was like she had been trapped in her own body, fighting for air, for a chance to breathe. For a brief moment, I thought she had done it. She had won. But the victory was short-lived. With a violent snap, the spirit inside her roared to life. It wasn't over, not by a long shot. The room seemed to collapse in on itself once more, the shadows deepening, and I could feel the coldness grip my heart again, freezing me in place. "You are nothing," the spirit hissed through her lips. "You are weak, and she is mine." The energy in the room shifted, growing darker, heavier, as though the very walls were pressing in on us. Lady Gaga's body went rigid again, her fingers twitching uncontrollably. Her head jerked back, and her body was once again completely still, as if the spirit had regained control. The real Lady Gaga, the person I thought I knew, was slipping away, being consumed by the shadow. I could see it now, clear as day. The battle inside her was not just a fight for her body. It was a fight for her soul. The spirit was devouring her bit by bit, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. But even in the midst of this terrifying struggle, something unexpected happened. I saw her again, the real her. For just a fraction of a second, a tear rolled down her cheek. It wasn't the tear of someone who had surrendered, someone who had given up. It was the tear of someone who was fighting. She was still there, buried beneath the darkness. And as long as she was fighting, there was hope. "I can still fight." Her voice broke through, barely above a whisper. "Please, help me." And in that moment, I realized something. She wasn't done yet. She was still in there, still fighting, and she needed me to help her break free. The spirit inside her roared with rage, but it wasn't invincible. It was struggling. It was trying to hold on, trying to crush her, but I knew if she could just get the chance, she could break free. But could I help her? Could I save her before the spirit consumed her completely? The fight wasn't over, but the stakes had grown higher. The darkness was tightening its grip, and now I was the only one who could help her. But at what cost? Would I be able to save her? Or would I become the next victim of the spirit's insatiable hunger? I couldn't breathe. The air in the room felt like it was being sucked out, leaving nothing but a suffocating void. The walls, once solid, felt as if they were closing in, and the shadows weren't just in the corners anymore. They had consumed the room, wrapping around me, around her, around everything. The darkness was alive, pulsating, a hungry beast that had been awakened. It was too strong, too relentless. Lady Gaga's body was no longer a vessel. It was a prison. She had fought so hard, tried so desperately to regain control, but the spirit had outlasted her. Her face twisted in agony as the shadow consumed her, inch by inch, piece by piece. She was disappearing into it, becoming part of it. And in those final moments, it wasn't just her soul that was at risk. It was everything. The shadow inside her was more than just a force. It was a ravenous entity, an ancient evil that had waited for years for the right moment. And now, that moment had come. "You can't stop me," the spirit's voice hissed, dripping with satisfaction. "She's mine, forever." The words were laced with venom, each one biting deep, but I couldn't move. I couldn't react. Every inch of my body was frozen, paralyzed by the overwhelming sense of helplessness. I watched, unable to look away as the darkness claimed her, swallowed her whole. Gaga's body convulsed violently in the chair, her eyes rolling back, the black void that once occupied them now pulsing in time with the shadow. The spirit was inside her, completely. She was no longer Lady Gaga. She was something else, something I didn't recognize, something that no longer cared about the fame, the persona, the woman she once was. And that's when the shadow started to shift again, growing, bigger, darker, more powerful. The figure inside her wasn't just an entity anymore. It was an overpowering force that had merged with her, become her, taken everything she once was. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was that the spirit wasn't just after her. It was after everything she had built, everything she had sacrificed. Fame, success, wealth. It wanted it all. The room trembled as if the weight of the spirit's power was too much for it to handle. Every surface shook, and the shadows on the walls seemed to reach for me, closing in, tightening. It was like the very walls of reality were being ripped apart, tearing open, revealing the true nature of what had been lurking in the dark. The spirit's voice came again, louder as if it had become part of the very air we breathed. "You don't understand." The voice echoed around me, surrounding me, drowning me. She was never meant to be. She was nothing more than a means to an end, a sacrifice. I could feel the weight of the words, the crushing truth behind them. Lady Gaga had never truly known what she was involved in, what kind of price she had paid for her fame, her power. She had been manipulated, used as a vessel for something much darker. And now, that vessel had been completely consumed by the spirit. I took a step back, but the darkness pushed me forward. It was pulling me in, closing in on me like a suffocating cloud. I reached for the door, but it was locked, and the handle felt like it was burning under my touch. I had to get out. I couldn't stay here. This was no longer a room with a celebrity. I was standing in the presence of something ancient, something monstrous, something that fed on souls. The spirit inside Lady Gaga let out a shrill laugh, one that echoed in every corner of the room. She is gone. It was a declaration, a final, unshakable truth. I am her now. My heart raced, my breath caught in my throat. The light above us flickered, casting harsh shadows across the room. I could see it now, the true form of the spirit, the shape, the void that had taken over her. It was no longer just a shadow. It was a creature of pure darkness, with no face, no recognizable features, just a swirling, moving mass of blackness that breathed, that spoke with a voice that seemed to come from everywhere at once. The room was no longer a room. It was a dimension of darkness, a prison. The walls no longer existed. There was no escape from it. I couldn't move, couldn't even scream. All I could do was watch as the darkness consumed everything, including me. "I will make them all pay," the spirit hissed, its voice dripping with malice. "Every last one of them." It wasn't just about Lady Gaga anymore. The spirit wasn't finished. It was still hungry. And I knew in that moment that I wasn't just a witness. I was a target. I was the next one on its list. The next one it would devour. I tried to run again, but the shadows grabbed me, pulling me back into the room. I could feel the cold fingers of the darkness closing around my throat, squeezing, choking the life out of me. But even as I fought against it, I could see her, the real Lady Gaga. For the briefest of moments, a flicker of recognition appeared in her eyes. She was still in there, still trying to break free, trying to claw her way out of the darkness that had swallowed her whole. But I could see it too. The spirit was far too powerful. It had already consumed everything that was once her. And I was next. But as the spirit grew stronger, something even darker started to stir. Something that had been lurking in the shadows all along. And this time, it wasn't just about Gaga. It was coming for me. I ran. There was no plan, no thought, just pure, unfiltered instinct. My feet slammed against the floor, my body moving of its own accord, propelled by a single primal need: escape. Escape from the hell that had become the room. Escape from the thing that had consumed Lady Gaga, swallowed her whole, and was now coming for me. But no matter how fast I ran, the darkness followed. It clung to me, wrapping around my limbs, biting at my skin. I could feel it in my bones, in my very soul. The spirit wasn't just some shadow, some supernatural force. It had become part of me. The room I had been in was gone, replaced by a suffocating void that threatened to swallow me whole. I could feel the walls closing in, the shadows creeping closer. There was nowhere to run. My mind screamed, begged for relief, but there was none to be found. The shadow that had taken over Gaga was now hunting me, feeding off my fear, growing stronger with every breath I took. I could feel its presence behind me, its voice echoing through my head, filling the spaces between my thoughts, drowning me in its hunger. You can't escape me. The voice was all around me, everywhere, seeping into the very air I breathed. You think you can run, but you'll never be free. I didn't know what to do. My body was moving on instinct, but I couldn't stop the crushing sense of doom that weighed on me. I was being hunted, and there was no way out. The spirit had made that clear. It was coming for me. It had claimed Gaga, and now I was next. The fear was suffocating. I could feel the walls around me closing in tighter with each step I took. My breath was coming in ragged gasps, my heart pounding in my chest like a drumbeat that only grew louder as I tried to outrun the darkness. But it was always there, always right behind me. I couldn't escape it. I stumbled into what I thought was a hallway, but it didn't look right. The walls seemed to warp, shifting like the space was bending around me. I turned around, and there it was, the shadow. It had followed me, even here, and now it was closer than ever. The space was collapsing around me, warping and twisting. I could feel it pulling at my mind, at my thoughts, dragging me into the very abyss I had tried so hard to escape. But the worst part wasn't the shadows, wasn't the dark presence that was tightening its grip on me. It was the realization that the spirit hadn't just taken Gaga. It had taken her soul. But that wasn't enough. No. Now it wanted everything. It wanted her fame, her glory, her legacy. And once it had that, it would move on to me. It had already set its sights on me, and there was no escaping its reach. I turned back again, only to find the hallway stretching out before me, endless, like the walls were stretching into infinity. The world around me was no longer real. It had been consumed by the spirit, and it was pulling me further into its world. I could feel the walls closing in on me, tighter, I tried to move, tried to push against them, but it was like I was trapped in a dream I couldn't wake up from. The darkness was everywhere. It was inside me now, pulling at my mind, wrapping itself around every thought, every breath. Then I saw it. Lady Gaga. But not the Lady Gaga I remembered. She was standing there, her body still, her eyes black and empty. The shadows around her twisted and writhed like they were alive. She wasn't herself anymore. She had become part of it. Part of the darkness that consumed everything she had been. Her body was still standing, but it wasn't her. The spirit had claimed her completely, and now it was using her as a puppet. It was the only version of her left. I wanted to scream, to shout, to do something, but no sound escaped my lips. I was too afraid, too paralyzed by the overwhelming terror that flooded my senses. The darkness was growing, expanding, and the shadow that had once been just an eerie figure was now an immense, all-encompassing force. The shadows closed in, and I could feel the spirit reaching for me. It wasn't just after Gaga anymore. It had its sights set on me. "You are next." The voice boomed in my ears, a low, guttural growl that seemed to come from every direction at once. And that's when I knew. I was already marked. There was no escape. The spirit had claimed Lady Gaga's soul, and now it was going to claim mine too. I could hear the echoes of her voice, faint, distant, as though she were still fighting inside the spirit's grip. "Help me, please." But it was no use. I tried to call out, to tell her I was there, but my voice wouldn't come. The spirit was too strong, and Gaga was lost. I could feel it, the weight of the truth. The darkness had won. It had taken her completely, and now it was going to take everything from me, too. The shadow wrapped around me, pulling me into its cold embrace, and in that final moment I could feel it, the suffocating darkness. It was everywhere. It was inside me. It had won. And just like that, the room went black. But what happened next was something I could never have prepared for. The darkness had taken me, but the true horror was still to come. The spirit wasn't finished. It had only begun. The darkness had swallowed me whole, but I wasn't dead. Not yet. I could still feel it. The presence, the spirit twisting around me, waiting for me to break, but something inside me resisted. Gaga's fight wasn't over either. She was still there, trapped, but she wasn't alone. The spirit had consumed her, but it hadn't finished me. And now, we were both bound to the same eternal nightmare, caught between worlds. The spirit's vengeance far from over. The shadows may have claimed everything, but they had not yet claimed me. Not yet.